What a night. Morning, Cornsey. Morning, everyone. Morning, Saints fans. I'm sure you're hurting or shocked to the news this morning that Brett Ratten is no longer the coach of the St Kilda Football Club. I feel for Brett. He's a great football person. He's exactly what you want at your football club. He's honest. He's courageous in his own way. He always has empathy for the player. He's terrific for us in the media. You get the sense you know what he's thinking and you know what he's feeling at all times. He's one of those guys, you know. It hasn't worked, and I know we're going to get Cal Toomey on later. He's had an unbelievable off-season, Cal. He's just broken every story, hasn't he? So I'm looking forward to getting really into the nitty-gritty of why this decision was reached, who actually made this decision, and when it was made in isolation, because we're going to fly blind a little bit for the first hour or so. Until then, Cornsey, because it only broke at 10 o'clock last night. But how do you feel about it? Where do you sit with the actual decision for St Kilda to part company after 66 games with Brett Ratten?
It's one of the most brutal decisions I've seen, and maybe it's a bit of a changing landscape into the way that AFL football is going and how ruthless some of these clubs are going to be. We see this in world sports from time to time. You see overseas such and such as sacked coach, it might be pretty early into their tenure, and you go, wow. But you don't follow it as closely as we follow the AFL. Largely, there's been a level of loyalty with AFL coaches. This is a coach that was re-signed, halfway through the year, and now he's gone the day after the trade period and 6 weeks out from the draft and a few weeks out from pre-season starting. So they announced that there was a review process going on. St Kilda, clearly, as you say, we're flying blind. So you asked me the question. My best guess is that the review was savage on the coach and/or they've already got a replacement and the replacement needs to be a big name. That would be my two best guesses, that either the review was just savage on the coach and they've gone, well, hang on, we can't let this fly by without making significant change, or they've identified a marquee coach to take over and one that they'll think will do a better job. But you were strong on their list throughout the trade period. I think some Saints fans pushed back on you. But in the end, how do you view this decision?
Well, for 66 games in the last 4 years, Brett Ratten's been taking a knife to a gunfight. There's no doubt about that. And he's been asked to win games and ultimately finals with a star-barren list. A list that if you judged the playing roster for mediocrity, they'd win a gold medal every year.
So do you think he's overachieved on the back? Do you think he's done a good job with what he's got? A knife to a gunfight.
He made the finals in 2020,
Yep.
and they won a final. And I thought, okay, I still thought they played. So I'm going to put all cards on the table. Okay, I thought they played a fraudulent game plan. Guys getting forward of the ball, everything at full rat power, no real control. In any St Kilda game you watched, there was no real control or handle on the game at any point. So they won games playing like that. And when they failed big. So I was always critical of the way they played. But then you look at the list and you say, well, if they play a conventional brand, who's going to win them the game? Who's going to stand? I mean, Jack Steele's a star. Okay, Max King, we talk about so many times like he's kicked 100 goals a year. He hasn't. Who's their next best player after Jack Steele?
Well, there's a couple that are on the same level, but Gresham is a good player.
Doesn't play. Never. He misses too much footy.
Jack Steele is a good, reliable leader, but he's probably not gonna win your games. He's a strong, consistent, well admired player. But yeah, after that,
hard, isn't it?
It is. Marshall has potential to be a star, but once again gets injured a lot and hasn't put a full season together. So they said this before the trade period. James Gallagher said we need stars, and that's why they had a crack at Jordan Ngoe. We need A graders. They weren't able to do anything in the trade period, and you go to the draft with pick 9, 28, and 32. It's not hardly exciting to get you right into the teeth of the draft either.
So my first thought last night when I heard it, and I thought this is the result. This all these decisions are calculated decisions you make in the cool, clear light of day. They're list decisions. They're made by a collective of people. So if those guys that have got the fingerprints on this list that have allowed the Saints to have a 10-win, 11-win ceiling on every year and really not contend with the big boys and not be part of it, not give the coach the best opportunity. If they've got a shred of decency, they walk today with Brett Ratten. They say, you know what, the part of the failings of this football club are in my department. I'm accountable for this. And I don't care whether that's Simon Lethland or James Gallagher or who it is, because this is not a one-man problem. It's not. You can't blame Brett Ratten for all of this. You can't, having signed him 100 days ago, as you said. I mean, this is laughable.
And with the strong endorsement that they did give him after they signed him, they said this balance and the ability to unite his coaches and players and staff in a relentless quest for excellence makes Brett the best person to lead us towards our much-long second premiership. That was the 8th of July. Now, the 18th of August, they announced this review, and Andrew Bassett, it's led by him, who's the president. Now, on the review, alongside of Bassett, was board member Jason Blake, the incoming Chief Executive Officer Simon Lethland, who had been promoted, David Noble, who had lost his job at North Melbourne and then was included on this review. Now, the review was underway before they had even announced that. They'd said that interviews had started. They had a comprehensive look at all aspects of the club which relate to on-field success. And there was some really strong words being thrown around on the back of this review. So, look, there's only we're guessing here, and Saints fans, we'd love for you to join in, and we've got callers lined up already. 1300 736 736. Well, what is your assessment of what has gone on at the St Kilda Football Club, and when will they talk?
I just wonder where Jeff Walsh sits in all of this, and we won't know for a couple of hours. Did the review reach him to the point where he had to say, "Hey, look, we got to act here," or was the decision already made? And the fact that they've waited to 5 minutes after the trade period. If the decision was already made, Cornsey, 2 weeks ago, but they didn't want a player purge, then, in my opinion, that's even worse. That's just misleading a whole football club or taking them down a path that you know is false. You know that the sell to the playing group and the players you're trying to attract is 100% misleading.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in the timings.
July the 8th, they re-signed him, or that was when it was announced after, speculating a week or so prior to that they would re-sign him. They then announced a significant review of the football department. That review was led by the president, Andrew Bassett, Jason Blake, the incoming CEO, Simon Lethland, who had been promoted from head of football, and David Noble was also a part of the review. Now, after the round 23 game, when the season came to a close for the Saints, the coach, Brett Ratten, was asked about the review process.
It's just to look at the program to make sure that we're on the right track, and really for us to look back and say, we probably, we didn't get this right either, because it's not about the players, all about the players. It's about the whole footy club, and that's what it's around for us, to make sure that whatever we do, we're trying to get better every day. That's me, everybody in our program. So I think the findings will be pretty self-explanatory. I think we sort of know what we're going to confront, but there might be some new things there that we can consider. But it's about us pushing forward to be a better footy team. And we didn't play finals, and that's what we're all striving to do. We want to try and win another premiership, let alone make finals. So if we have a review where there's some real home truths and we talk about it to make us better, well, we should be up for it.
Gee.
Well, he's blindsided. Really, he had no idea this was coming.
Well, I think, so put yourself in Brett's shoes for a moment. I think he's entitled to say, and as I said earlier, I felt like for the last 4 years he's been taking a knife to a gunfight. I don't think they've been stacked with the artillery that's required to win consistently. They're star barren at the moment. Their roster's full of mediocrity. I think that's even been a concession from James Gallagher since the trade period finished. So what do you expect from your coach? I mean, it was a 10-win season. Okay, not good enough. But they, by their own admission, have said this is not a premiership winning list. Jeff Walsh has been there 5 minutes and has said the things need to change here. So I don't expect this to be the last port of call at St Kilda. I'd be surprised if it was only Brett Ratten. And I challenge those to put their hand up or put their head up. Guys that have been there like Simon Lethland, James Gallagher, and all those guys that have made those decisions that have affected the list, whether it's Hanbury or a draft pick or a trade. I mean, I went through the list clogger capital of Australia the other night on Fox Footy. They've got a dozen names that have come into the place that have had no effect or minimal effect. So this is not just a Brett Ratten issue.
No, and their recruiting's been awful, and that dates right back to the mistakes that were made at the draft, the access to Petrarca and Bontempelli and Aaron Norn, and these. Now that's what kills you. When you get those early picks and you get them wrong, and then 7-8 years later you see the players that you could have had develop into premiership winning stars of the game, then that's a significant issue for you. So you're spot on, and Brett Ratten alluded to that in that little piece of audio. He said it's not just me, it's the whole program.
I'd love someone to ask Cornsey at the press conference, did you give Brett Ratten the best opportunity as St Kilda coach? Did you give him the support and the list and just all the trimmings around the edges that you need for success? You know, you talked about Craig McRae earlier. I think Craig McRae's had unbelievable support at Collingwood with the assistant coaching panel he put together. But there's a lot of leftovers from the previous regime that was in pretty good order. Did Brett get that?
Yeah, it's amazing because we were saying the same things about Collingwood 3 years ago about their list and the dire straits that they were in. Weren't we? Like the salary cap strife that they were in, the embarrassment.
Yep.
And that continued throughout this period with Brodie Grundy. Now, Brett Ratten was 33 wins and 33 losses as St Kilda coach. They've made a few changes with their coaching group. Lenny Hayes comes back in. Corey Enright came in from Geelong as well, and he was lauded at the start of the year when they were 8-3 for their defensive structures and mechanisms and pressure that was applied before it fell apart. And Brendan Lade is off to the Western Bulldogs from St Kilda this year. Who's the next coach? We can speculate on that. Have they already identified someone? You would think it's going to have to be a bigger fish, I would have thought. Can you?
Yeah. The man that really fascinates me in all this is Jeff Walsh. If there's one thing you don't want this old the knock at the door, it's Jeff. You think, I'm in trouble here.
Sniper.
Let's have a listen to what he said to Gary and Tim back on October 5 when he had a quick chat after being appointed to St Kilda.
And this might sound abrasive and the Saints fans might get upset, but one of the things that I think, when asked about, how do I see St Kilda, I think the competition would say there's been a degree of irrelevance. As I say, that should be abrasive. That should sort of choke down people's throats. And I hope that going forward that I can contribute to a profile that gives the Saints the due respect that they crave.
So I loved the comment, and I went on radio the next day. I said, I actually liked hearing that. It's a bit of honesty from someone at St Kilda. So that was on October 5 with Gary and Tim. Do you think he would have known this was in the works then?
Do I think he would have known?
Like the review would largely have been completed by that. He's new to it, so we don't know. And you're asking the question, how significant and how influential has he been in this decision? But he would have had a fair indication, I would have thought, on October the 5th when he made those comments.
Yeah, I think Jeff's a wonderful acquisition for St Kilda right now. He's the perfect man. He suffers no fools. He preaches from the Bible of accountability, and he has a great bullshit radar. I mean, one that Nasser would be proud of, I reckon. He sees through anything that's not quite absolutely on track. He won't allow people to hide in the shadows. He'll put them under the spotlight, and that's what they need. I mean, people get angry with you when you're critical of St Kilda because I think they meander along. At some point, Chris Scott this year said it perfectly. You've got to take a risk on having it work big or fail big. I just don't feel like they've done that. And it is a gamble, isn't it? It's This is a tough competition. You don't have to get a lot wrong to fail. But I just don't think they've ever been able to land a big fish or a superstar, and they've got the draft. When they've had those picks, they've got it wrong.
Horribly wrong. Who else but to get on at a time like this than a man who coached the club for 117 games with great success, 6 finals. His name is Grant Thomas. Grant, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Good morning.
We're trying to digest the news and come up with our own theories as to why they have made this decision. What's your best theory, Tomo, as to what has led the club to make such a brutal call?
I think the realisation that we've been probably wallowing around in mediocrity for so long, and in the 150th year we've got to take a stronger stance and get ourselves into the premiership business. I don't think we've been there for a long, long time, and maybe only 3 times in our 150-year history have we been a chance. And I applaud the club for making decisions to get us in the premiership business in a nutshell. And I don't know whether this is the first one or not, but I definitely think we need to make some very, very strong decisions, because where we are at the moment in all aspects of the club isn't going to get us to where we need to get to. So you can, it's big stuff. It's huge announcements and on everything else, and it looks like a big backflip by the club. But I tell you what, there's one thing worse than making a big mistake, and that's making two. And if you made the wrong mistake of recontracting someone, you don't just pan out over another 2 years, because, apart from me going completely mental over that period, I don't think it's in the best interest. So I applaud the club if they continue to make more decisions to support it, and that is the infrastructure around a coach is critically important, and whether it's list management, recruitment, drafting, leadership, programming, all of those other critically important things that add up to tell you that you're in the premiership business. We need to make decisions everywhere, and I would expect this to be the first of many.
Did you feel this coming, Tom? I love you on Twitter. You're pretty active. You're pretty honest, and you've sort of been steering down this path for quite some time, I feel. Did you know this was coming? Did you feel this bubbling?
No, I didn't know it was going to happen now. I have had discussions with the club and have voiced my opinions on things over the last 12 months. I've had lots of discussions last year, said I'd get out of the way for a year to see how things went. And I've had discussions over the last, month or two, couple of months. And so I left them with no doubt that there needed to be big changes, major changes, and not just at the edge. Changes that actually impact the direction we're on and getting us onto the right train track of success, because you can't get on the right train track if you haven't got the right people. And you need to have the right systems and programs in place to support that train track. And I just don't think we're on the right train track and haven't been. So I've been very strong to the club about my views, and I know that they've been very determined to actually make changes to right the direction that the club's going, because clearly it's wrong. It's not where it needs to be. It's always a difficult decision, but when a club has made a call to reappoint someone for 2 years, and I don't know Rats very well, but I know he's an outstanding citizen, and everyone loves Rats and a great person and everything else, and so it's very disappointing for him. But it's a brutal environment and a brutal industry, and the club needs to make the decisions in its own best interests.
So did the club seek your feedback, did they, Tomo?
Wouldn't matter if they did, Kane. I'd give it anyway. But, I think that they probably tolerate me to a degree, but I've been banging for a while because I've had enough. I've just had enough, mate. We've got to get into that premiership business, and we're seeing great clubs like the Bulldogs and Richmond and Melbourne and that. And Geelong after a decade of finals, but they've been in the premiership business for a long time, and the model's pretty simple and pretty clear, and you guys talk about it every day. Why does everyone else know about it, but St Kilda doesn't, and our penny doesn't drop? So I'm glad the penny's dropping, and hopefully it gets us on the right track.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're spot on there, Tomo. It's a brutal business, and sometimes these calls have to be made. But what do you want to hear today? So at 11:30 at Moorabbin, the president, Andrew Bassett, will get up, and the CEO, Simon Lethland, and they'll tell us what's happened and where to from here. What do you want to hear from those guys?
I want to hear who the new coach is. I want to hear it immediately.
You think they know?
I want us to. Well, hopefully you know who. Hopefully you know those decisions before you make big decisions like this. I don't want them to go through a process. Processes in my mind are for people who don't know what to do. If you want to make a decision and appoint someone to run your business, you go out and target the very best person you can find, and you get them. And irrespective of circumstances, you just secure them. So I'd like to know that. I'd like to know that there's further decisions coming. I think there's a lot of microscope over the list management and recruitment area, and I think that should be a part of the discussion at 11:30 today as well.
Who do you think is the right person? Have you got someone in your mind as who you'd like to coach your club?
There's the obvious choices,
Which are
around.
Thomas.
Well, I've been very me. No, I couldn't do it last time. I think that I'm a very passionate Luke Beveridge fan. I'll be doing everything I could to X him out of there and bring him home, if you like. I think he would be perfect. I would absolutely give James Hird a good tryout. Maybe I'm a little bit anti-AFL in doing that, but I think James has got great potentials. I don't know who Choco Williams has offended, but I'm glad he's offended someone, so I'd give him an opportunity to look. Ross Lyon is obviously a highly credentialed coaching candidate. They're the guys that probably come to my mind, because you would either want a premiership coach or a person can deliver a premiership, because what else are we here for? That's the business we're in.
Yeah, and I love your forthright and honest comments, Tomo. If they were to do a process and sit down and get organised, if they haven't already made that decision on a coach, would you get involved? Would you put your hand up if they come to you? Would you say yes?
I would do anything I could to help St Kilda Football Club in an unofficial capacity. I'm not interested in boards. I'm not interested in positions. I'm only interested in success. And if that is to provide them with input as to the process they go through, of course I would. I'd be more than happy to help. I'm only interested in one thing, and that's a premiership. And every decision they make, every person they speak to, every person they turn to, every action they take should be with that in mind.
What can you tell us about Lenny Hayes and the prospects that he might be ready, having just returned to the club? Tomo, you coached him.
To be the senior coach?
Yeah.
Well, dear Len, I don't think Len's having gone away
hard out 1 minute
back into it. I don't think that he's a prime candidate for this. Down the track, who knows? But what I do know, he has a sort of integrity and character of the person that you build clubs around or organisations around. So it's a massive fill-up and a massive move for the club to get someone of his character back in there.